cities and all the flying traffic. And the challenge of trying to make buildings that don't all look the same, that have distinct architecture, was difficult. Throughout the sequence, the architectural style progresses. We began up near Padme's apartment, where the buildings are very tall and rounded. And then as we proceed through the city, we go through different styles. We start in the upper city, and then we go down into the older city, where we have an older, more linear, squared-off architectural style. And then from there, we go into an industrial area, big gas generation plants and electrical power stations. And then into the financial district, where we have very glassy buildings that are tall and green, and then we go into warehouse district, where we have big storage facilities, and then into the entertainment district, where the chase ends.
When Obi-Wan is shot down and Anakin rescues him, and it appears that it's all in a day's work, there's nobody sort of excited about it. It sets up this relationship that they do these kinds of amazing stunts all the time. It's just part of their job.
The ambience on Coruscant varies depending on the density of traffic and the location within the city. There wasn't really a distinction made in the sound between daytime or nighttime. The textural distinctions were really made on the basis of the location within the city. There's the entertainment area, there's the financial district, there's the industrial section. I made up sounds which reflected the different areas. Or I made up elements of sound which could be used to build, in layers, the density for each area.
Okay, coming up way over on the left-hand side of frame, there's a trench. In that trench is an X-Wing being pursued by 3 TIE fighters right here. Hard to see, but it's there.
When I started the sound design for the speeder chase sequence, the original idea I had, I thought perhaps instead of giving the sounds of the speeders a jet-like sound or a combustion sound, that I would make all of the sounds of the speeders out of musical instruments. And then for music score, I would use just percussion. Although it worked very well in the temp, it wasn't so successful when it was put up against the music that Johnny Williams wrote for this scene. He tended to be a bit more orchestral and less percussive, and I really had to change some of the sounds a bit. Zam's speeder was the most musical of the two, and the sounds for that speeder were made out of an old 1950s era electric guitar and running one's finger up and down the strings of the guitar and recording it through an old amplifier.
I'm constantly trying to deal with the fact that Anakin is slightly ahead of himself at all times. You think that he's gone a little bit too far and he's made a mistake, and then you realize that he's actually very clever. And we do that a couple times. And I like trying to keep a kind of nonchalant attitude about this action between the 2 Jedi, like this is all in a day's work. The third section of this chase is when Anakin leaves the speeder and jumps onto the top of Zam's speeder, which gives a completely different sort of approach to a chase. It ends up roughly in the same kind of situation that we started with, which in the beginning it was Obi-Wan hanging off of a assassin droid, and in the end it's Anakin hanging off a speeder. I like the idea of having a kind of a symmetry to sequences like this, and going back and forth between the 2 characters of one being right and then the other one being right, and one sort of seeming foolish and then the other one-upping him and that sort of thing.
The other way. Once again, you've proved. If you'll excuse me.
Digital Anakin falling.
I hate it when he does that.
Digital Anakin.
And then we cut to real Hayden. So he's shot in front of blue screen and rotoscoped, which means they paint out all around him, and then he's blended in the scene. And then he's right back into digital again. This section, he's actually lying on the real vehicle that was shot in Sydney on a gimbal rig, which means it's a big mechanical rig that allows us to pitch and roll the vehicle so that Hayden could slide around on it. And meanwhile, the character Zam is inside the vehicle, turning and reacting to George's direction of whether she's banking to the left or the right or she's diving. And Hayden is doing all of these stunts himself. The gimbal rocking back and forth and us shooting him from all these different angles.
Here we have Zam doing a transformation just for about a second or so. Computer-generated face.
George did that on purpose. He wanted to be short enough that some people in the audience weren't sure what they saw. That was sort of the goal for that.
And we put little things in here. There's a thematic bit of humor that goes through the whole movie of the Jedis keep losing their lightsabers. Later on, Obi-Wan will give this little speech to Anakin about how important the lightsaber is, but as it turns out, everybody starts losing their lightsabers before too long. I like chase sequences. I have a fondness for racing, and I inevitably put something like a chase sequence in every movie in one form or another, or a racing scene or something. It's just, I love speed, and I love the tension and excitement of a chase.
This was interesting. I remember they had the cameras basically hanging from a big rope or cable, didn't they? They were just spinning it on the
camera was
stage.
on a dolly, and the camera was just panning around as the characters ran in a 360-degree circle around them. We had a partial set, and there were a few blue areas, but most of it was set.
And then filled up with extras. And then when you see it, it looks like they're running in a straight line.
We shot this sequence in a day. We only built one side of the set, and then we replicated it onto the other side. Everything in the background was done at ILM with miniatures.
I particularly like the advertising sign in that shot. Two aliens arguing about different flavors.
She runs into a kind of sports bar, a gambling casino. I wanted to do a variation on the theme of the cantina. Decided I didn't really want to use a musical motif in here, but wanted to let the score, Johnny Williams, build the suspense of the sequence as they tried to find the bounty hunter in the middle of the crowd.
This is a nightclub scene that I got the opportunity to cast all the lovely women in this scene. There were a lot of extras. We had about 125 people in this sequence.
When you create sound for a scene like the sports bar that Obi-Wan and Anakin walk into, it's important that you create all the necessary layers of sound and put them together to form the right impression without any one thing jumping out and seeming to be artificially too loud, but it's an ensemble of sounds which gives it the subtle reality. I remember I spent a day or so just pretending I was a sports announcer, announcing the different sporting events that they see on the screens, and I wrote out a fake play-by-play of these mythical games here.
This was originally a non-visual effect shot, but George decided that he wanted to have a glowing death stick in his hand, so we added that. Then he decided he wanted to have antennas on the character's head, so we put those in there. And then he decided that once we had the antennas there, that it didn't make sense for him to have ears, so we got rid of his ears.
There was an early version of this sports bar scene in which it was actually played up more as a nightclub. And at one point, the idea was that there might be a band present playing, and we may cut to the band or the performers. And the idea, although it was appealing to me, George felt that it may echoed too closely the classic cantina sequence.
So Anthony Daniels, the actor portraying C-3PO throughout the series, makes a cameo appearance here. Right here is Anthony Daniels.
There he is again over Anakin's shoulder, turns back. Yet another in the series of Star Wars severed limbs. I've actually tried to talk to George about the whole reason for the severed limbs in these movies, and he always just sort of smiles and chuckles and never gives me the real answers.
I use recurring themes in the movies. I'm constantly taking the same motif and twisting it into a different way. In this case, the cantina scene from New Hope is reminiscent of this scene, where in that scene Obi-Wan cuts off the arm of somebody who's threatening Luke. This one, it's Obi-Wan cuts off the arm of the bounty hunter. Very similar to what he does later on in A New Hope.
Back in the alley, we have a handful of shots where we needed to do a transformation. Zam is really an alien, artificially taking human form, and as she dies, she reverts back to her original shape.
In this case, we're matching the performance of the actress on the day when she actually falling back. We had to match in a three-dimensional face, both a human version of it and then the alien version of it, and we did a 3D morph to the alien face.
This scene coming up is a scene that kind of came late in the editing process, in the sense that this is the Jedi Temple, and we are actually using plates that were shot for Episode 1. So everything that you see over here in terms of the background is shot for Episode 1. And then we had to remove some characters and put new characters in. Sam had to be shot, obviously for this scene, and then Anakin and Obi were shot on blue screen and then recombed over backgrounds that we already had. So in a sense, we are basically, marrying film and HD, and also computer graphics.
This scene was actually added later after I had my first cut. It's one of those scenes that you don't like to write, but ultimately you have to. It's the scene that kind of explains what's going on and who's going to go where. It's kind of a logistics scene.
From an editorial standpoint, the scene between Anakin and Palpatine came about a year or so into the editing. This was not a scene that was part of the original scenario. But as things developed with the story, it became evident that it would help a great deal to establish a direct connection between Palpatine and Anakin, and that there was a relationship there that was private and not perhaps even known to the other Jedis or anyone else.
I had all these hints that Palpatine had been helping Anakin, but I needed an explicit scene that actually spelled it out, and where you could see some of Anakin's dialogue later on has come from Palpatine.
This sequence was added late in the production of the film. We needed a moment when Mace and Obi-Wan and Yoda were talking about Anakin. We realized right away that there's no way that Yoda's going to be able to keep up to them. Yoda, being small and being old, can only walk so fast, and it was really going to restrict the two actors, the two full-size men, in terms of how they were moving down that hallway. So George came up with the idea of putting him in this little hovering chair.
It's very difficult to put a tall person and a short person together in the same shot. The camera angles either become very high or very low and are not really particularly flattering or dramatically interesting.
Establishing shots are just to remind you really where you are. You saw in that last shot that you actually see the window being replaced from the previous night when Obi-Wan jumps out of the window. It crashes and breaks.
This is where the plot thickens with Jar Jar. Since Padme has to leave, she gives her second in command, the representative of Naboo, Jar Jar Binks, orders to watch after things and represent Naboo in the Senate, which ultimately leads to a more difficult situation.
I do not like this idea of hiding.
Don't worry. Now that the Council has ordered an investigation, it won't take Master Obi-Wan long to find this bounty hunter.
This scene in the bedroom is the first real scene between Anakin and Padme. We get to see that Anakin is frustrated with Obi-Wan, and you get to see him sort of, be a young bratty kid, but then at the same time have an underlying strength and an underlying flirtation and a little bit of danger in him that is just beneath the surface. He's both very shy and awkward, and then at the same time kind of bold and strong and angry and frustrated. So I'm trying to play those two qualities in Anakin at this point, just really establish the complexities of his character of being young and wanting and having a lot of love for Obi-Wan, but at the same time being extremely frustrated with being held back and impatient with his progress as a Jedi. I also wanted to establish that Padme was still kind of the older of the two, and that she was a little bit more in charge than Anakin. Even though Anakin has grown up, she's still the boss.
You said it yourself.
Please don't look at me like that.
Why not?
It makes me feel uncomfortable.
Sorry, milady.
So we had a miniature of this dock that the ship's landing in, but the ship is computer graphics.
Interior of the bus